What is going on, beautiful people? I hope you are having an amazing day. Welcome back to another episode of the Thrive Forever Fit Show. I'm your host, Jay Nixon, and if you know anything about me or you've listened to this show for any amount of time, you know that my goal is to help you live your happiest, healthiest life while on the quest to cure obesity. And I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, I am immensely grateful that you spend your time listening to me rant and ramble about all things health, wellness, abundance, and opportunity. It absolutely means the world to me. Today's episode is sponsored by my brand new weight loss transformation program called F.L.E.X. F.L.E.X stands for a flexible lifestyle eating and exercise program. And my promise is this: it will be the last program you ever need to purchase. It is a weight loss program that is not a diet. I know that just blew your mind. This is not a diet. There's no pills, potions, or false promises that you have to purchase. There's no fad, no covers of magazines, no doctors in lab coats. This is real deal lifestyle transformation that is going to change your life forever. You will never need to do another diet. You're going to get expert level support and accountability. You're going to get transformative information about how to eat, when to eat, what to eat. There's 3 reasons that people struggle with weight loss. It's too much, too often, or the wrong combination. They're either eating too much food, too often, or they're eating the wrong combinations. And I'm going to help you fix all 3 of those. Thousands of people just like you have ditched the depressive diet roller coaster, have come on board with the Thrive Forever Fit F.L.E.X program and are transforming their lives. We've got clients that have lost 10 pounds in the first 7 days, 15 pounds, 20 pounds. We've got clients that are over 130 pounds down. Guys, I promise you, this is the last program you'll ever need to purchase. And I am more than honored to offer it to you so that I can help you on your journey. All right, let's get to the show. Oh, and welcome to the show, brother. How you doing?
Jay, thank you so much for having me.
Dude,
big fan
I'm
of this
excited.
show. So yeah, very excited
Thank
as well.
you. You know what? Everybody always says that. I appreciate your tenacity in actually, being a fan of the show and wanting to come on. Like you've got a fascinating story, man. I mean, are you 35 or are you younger than 35?
37.
You're 37. Okay. But you're the current world record holder in Ireland for 35 and older.
Current world champion, yeah, for
World champion.
35 or older, yeah.
Okay, 35 and older world champion. That's awesome, dude.
Yeah, it was good. Yeah, it's lovely. It did it in Poland. So bet an American guy who's quite good. So yeah, delighted to win that.
Do you know who, and this is a shot in the dark, have you ever heard of a guy named Rick Beardsell?
The name sounds familiar, but no.
He's like, I want to say he's like from around the England area, like somewhere over there. And he's kind of the same thing. Like he's a
Masters,
he's
athlete.
a Masters world champion and like, or the, champion for his age demographic. So some super fit guys just still doing it into their late 30s. I love that.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's great. I think people are much more aware. If I think of my dad, it would have been maybe like a game of soccer once a week, or you wouldn't have seen people just go out for running or whatever. But I think people are much more like aware of fitness. It's such a weird dichotomy we are in now, where like people are way better with like fitness and nutrition on one side, and then like way worse.
Oh.
I think before there was like much more people like central, like there was no one like grossly obese, but then there was less people who were active. So it's a funny time,
especially on the nutrition front. Well, I was just having this conversation the other day, and it was like I'm 48. I'll be 49 this year, and so
Jesus, you're looking great for it.
Oh, I appreciate that, man. Growing up, nobody worked out. Like my mom and dad's age, nobody worked out. I mean, my grandfather had some of those weights that you can put sand in or kind of make them yourself.
Yeah.
You may even be too young for that. And had grip strength things and like ankle weights, but it was very I would say pedestrian from a fitness standpoint, right? But I think they ate better because they ate real food, right? Because there wasn't the prevalence of the grocery stores that are 24/7, 365. They couldn't get bananas year round, whereas now you can have a banana anytime you want it.
But it's just such a weird one, cause I don't know about you growing up, but when we grew up, it was if you saw, there might be one obese person in your class, but it'd be out of 24. Where if I see kids now, it's at least half of them But also then there was still like bad food. Like I feel like my parents know more about nutrition now than like the dinners like I learned to have because of like athletics we brought in. Like we're like, say if we had a spaghetti bolognese, it was like white spaghetti with just like a sauce and then mince, and that was it.
Yeah.
There was no like, okay, let's add like red onion and veg to this.
Yeah.
You know, so it's a weird thing. And it's like we'd have like Coke and stuff, and
yeah,
you know,
I agree.
like
I
sugar.
agree.
It's like I don't remember eating like I think it's so cheap now though. I think just people can have, you know, for us like something was expensive, so like a treat was like a treat, you know. So where now it's like everybody just has
every
biscuits
day.
or everything just there. It's just so easy to have like.
Well, I mean, I grew up in Texas. You grew up in Ireland, obviously. So I mean, couldn't be further apart. So I'm gonna ask you a couple of questions. So when I grew up, the fast food industry hadn't really taken off. I remember when I was a senior in high school, the town next to mine, not even in my town, got the first McDonald's, which
we were the same,
within like within 100-mile radius. So we didn't grow up eating McDonald's or KFC or like fast foody type things, but we did eat like, you know, growing up in the South, like you always had, you know, biscuits, like a big floury, like, you know, doughy biscuit, and then white gravy, like things that quote unquote aren't super healthy, right? By today's standards. But like you said, I always use this analogy, and tell me what it was like kind of growing up in Ireland and having that kind of like community. If you look back at like a family reunion photo from like 50 years ago, maybe 70, 80 years ago, nobody was overweight. There was like there was one uncle, and you're like, how did he get so big? But he was one guy. And but now if you look at a family reunion photo, it's the other way. There's like two people that aren't overweight and everybody else is, even the kids. Was it the same way kind of in Ireland?
It's 100% the same way.
Okay.
Like, as I said, even if you see like children now, like when we were growing up, it's like, you had one kid that was overweight per class. Now it's like at least half. Like it's like that thing even with Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. They had to actually change. If you look at a kid in 1970s of what they were considering, like he's the overweight kid compared to what they actually had to expand in the Johnny Depp version, it's like crazy, you know. So it's just a weird thing though, because I just think it's split more. It's like some people, I think everyone used to eat roughly the same, and then we were all out exercising. That was one thing that I think, you know, when we were growing up, like we were outside all the time. All the time.
Yeah.
Where it's like, so we mightn't be eating, and then maybe, you know, we were just having white bread. We wouldn't know about like wholemeal bread or pita breads, but you know, you're just having your one and then being like,
so we weren't necessarily eating great. No. I think we weren't consuming as much, and like you said, the access. It was like to get like to get a candy bar or something like that was like a treat. Whereas now, kids, I see kids in Starbucks, like getting a giant, ice cream, coffee, sugary beverage. We just didn't have access to that or the money to go buy that.
Yeah, exactly.
So
I think that's a big part.
Maybe it's access. Yeah, that's interesting. And you're kind of in the same world I am. Give me a little bit about your background. So you're a physiotherapist, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so walk me through that. Like, how did you get into that world?
So
like,
basically, obviously I was quite good at running, from an early age. So that would get you interested in like human body and going to like physical therapists for where you are. We call them chartered physios here. So would have done that, then would have gone. I spent a semester over in Montreal in Canada. Absolutely loved that, and they had that functional movement screen, and I just loved that idea of, you know, an injury not being like the knee not being the only reason for knee pain. It could be that the hip isn't moving well or the ankle isn't moving well, and just how the whole body interlinks. So I came home. I was then focusing on physical therapy, but also like really developing like better movement and Pilates and like more like advanced rehabs of like thinking about the ways that the body moves and what's the best way to go about getting better movements, and then move from that then into this latest thing, which is kind of online Pilates and this back aware belt, which kind of gives people feedback on the way they move. Because I give people exercises. I know the exercises I wanted to give, but then people would come back and they'd be doing them totally wrong. And I was like, if they could see what I see,
Right.
they would never move like that. They would like just either stop or go. So then that's taken like this process of over like 3 years to develop this piece of equipment that kind of vibrates when you're in a poor position, or you can see your position. So yeah, that's kind of where I was active. And then I've kept my running going with the physio, and then really looking at like better movement and trying to get people moving better and getting them stronger.
Yeah, we're going to dive into the back aware belt, because I think that's fascinating. I looked at the website and it's really unique the way you've kind of constructed that whole, philosophy or system.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Did you go that route because you were seeing that very prevalent in the practice? Like when clients were coming in or patients were coming in, were people presenting with a lot of back pain, or was this something you've been interested in, or how'd you kind of get down to that, to that level, right? Back versus knee versus hip versus everything else. Is it just because it's such an important piece?
Yeah. And it's like, to be candid, sometimes it's like, that was the bit that I could fix. Like I'd always put my like fingers in their back, or, move their leg out. Because if you think of like what makes people move correctly is only like 3 things. Fourth will be anatomy, which you can't fix. If you've got like a joint that's fused, there's nothing we can do. But it's like, the first one was mobility, which I can like help with like, different mobility drills. If you're doing a mobility drill, say it's either the joint, the muscle, we can come back to that, but it'd be the joint, muscle spasm, like foam rolling, or it needs to be stretched. Then, so I've come up with like different like exercises for that. Then the next area was like activation. Like people can't physically say switch on the core, switch on the glutes. So you need to really work on that, like just getting them like burning, like it was so funny when people come to my clinic, I have back pain, and I was given this stretch and it's still sore. I'm like, you sit on your ass 10 hours a day and you think a 30-second stretch is going to fix that. It's like, it's not. It's not. You need to burn these muscles. You need to wake them back up.
Right.
And then the last reason why people weren't moving correctly was what I call like motor control. It's like they don't have an awareness of their technique. Yeah. Okay, so once they're moving correctly, they can activate the muscles in a basic sense. But if I got them to do a squat, they'd like round at their back rather than move through their hips. Yeah. And it's like, it was just like, I had the idea, honestly, for probably 10 years, never did anything with it. And then eventually I was just like in bed and I was like, I got to try this. And I just emailed my local enterprise office, like they help you with like ideas. Well, I thought there might be a grant, because I was like, God, it's going to cost a bit. And I was like, here, listen, I have this idea, explain that. They're like, yeah, come in and show us your plans. I was like, guys, I got no plans. I'm like in my bed emailing you this idea. So that's kind of where it came about, just seeing people, giving them exercises. The mobility ones, they come back doing okay. The activations were okay. Sometimes the position wasn't great. And then the motor control wasn't brilliant. And it's like, how do I get them to get this ingrained in them to do it correctly? And then, like, yeah, as I said, it wasn't an overnight thing by any means.
Yeah. And so when you got people to start to do all those things, like be able to activate, be able to, hip hinge correctly, all those things,
yeah.
And then you started seeing less prevalence of the back issues.
Oh yeah. Like we call it, like, there's controversy about this.
There's controversy about everything, Eoin.
Yeah. And some people's thing is that, like, and everything is great. Like, some people's thing is that, like, it doesn't matter, just do any type of exercise, it'll help the back, which in ways is right. Like, if you get stronger and you get moving, and then, but I have a PhD in biomechanics, so I'm very like, the way you move does impact things. Like, so we want a lot of times spare the spine. Like, a lot of times what's happening, like, at least 85% of the back pain I see is just because the back is moving too much. So there's a thing called the joint by joint approach, which essentially is like, your ankle should have good movement. Your knee is a hinge joint. It really should only move up and back. It should only flex and extend. It shouldn't move left to right. Your hip is a ball and socket joint, so that should be able to move in any direction. Your lower back shouldn't move that much. Like, in terms of rotation, we're only meant to have 4 degrees of rotation at each vertebrae. Then your upper back, that's where you should have decent movement. The lower part of your neck should be quite stable. The upper two vertebrae is where you have the movement. And because of like sedentary living, what happens is we get a reversal on that. Like the ankles get stiff, the hips, especially from sitting, get stiff. And then our DNA isn't much evolved from cavemen or cave women. So because of that, we always need to be able to move to like hunt and get food or get out of danger. So the last thing that will actually go is like, you know, if someone has to get a hip replacement, it's in their 60s, it's like, or 50s, it's just that the joint has got so stiff and now it's causing issues. And then it's usually like not a quick fix.
Right.
I see predominantly knee pain and back pain because they're joints that, because the ankle and the hip are stiff, they're essentially moving too much. So the knee is kind of buckling out of position and causing like a friction that's causing the knee to be sore. The back.
So is the knee trying to compensate? Is that why it's moving inappropriately?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
So I just want everybody to kind of understand what you're
exactly
saying.
So say like, imagine, I won't be able to do here, but imagine, right, the ankle is meant to like go over like this. If the ankle gets blocked, you still will always be able to walk. Now you still need that range. So now instead of, to get that extra range, you got to like kind of move in through your knee and then back out. And you do that over time. It's like, rather than it being completely flat, if people are watching, it's like one part is getting grinded on and then that gets sore. Same, if your hips get tight and we're sitting, people then start to round and flex at their back a lot. So a lot of what I'm trying to teach people, and I see massive improvements with this, is that after a few weeks, people get aware of like, oh yeah, I'm rounding at my back. And if we can get out of those positions, it kind of spares the spine. So now we're lifting, or we're walking, or we're moving with better technique. And then that allows us to kind of focus on getting the movement better through the hips, you know, with our bridging or some mobility work, and get more stable at the spine and kind of reset the normal order that should be there for people.
I see this all the time, like in the fitness studio, is people with, you know, poor mobility in the ankle. If you just get them to do a basic air squat,
yes,
if the ankle won't move properly, they can't properly
100%.
pull off. They can't properly pull off the squat, right? And then they'll always say, "Well, I've got knee problems."
Yeah.
They usually don't have in my experience, they usually don't have a knee problem unless there's been an injury or something of that nature. But like, it's usually an immobility problem, right? Their IT band is so freaking tight that it's pulled it's pulled their hip out of a right alignment, which then their ankle doesn't move. And then they go to the doctor. The doctor's like, "Oh, you have a bad knee." Like, well, you don't have a bad knee. You have bad mobility from the entire chain.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes, you know, Stuart McGill would talk about this even in the back, where, and the same with the knee. It's like, if they get an MRI early on the knee, they're not going to see any damage. Same with the back. A lot of times, I would never recommend surgery unless they're getting, like, say, shooting pains below the knee or a drop foot.
Yeah.
But say they can get an early MRI on their back, there's no damage. Even they're like, my back's really sore, because they're moving excessively in that joint. Now, after time, that joint, say, gristles and like basically stops the movement there. And then the next one gets sore. And then, but when you get the second MRI, it's like, oh, you can see the damage here. But like, that one is actually fine. And the one that's causing pain is the one above it. And then they go in and they like try fix the one that's like fused, because they can see where that damage is. And it's the same where, because this is a functional thing, a lot of times, as you said, if you clean up the ankle mobility and you release off those, like a foam roll, your quads, you'll just take that knee pain. Like, it'll just go.
Let's talk about the SI joint for a second. Like, so I see this a lot in the studio. Like, when people come in, they'll have like back pain, and they'll generally, you know, it'll generally present from that sacroiliac area.
Yeah, right-sided, left-sided back pain.
Yeah. Okay. Is that associated again with the immobility? And is that causing that joint to become either unstable, or what is there any connection to that at all?
Yeah, sometimes they say like there's 4 things that can cause something to like get out of a line. The first one is like micro trauma. So it can be like, you know, the way we're moving, that stuff that we're talking about, the way we're moving, and then over time, if you're not moving smoothly through the hip and you're kind of hiking at your pelvis, it can just kind of like, because it's moving too much, it can essentially then lock into a bad position. So essentially, rather than it kind of the whole pelvis moving here, it can be like tilted, like we just like twist it in, and now it's harder to move. And then that causes either pain in the back, or they kind of feel pain in the hip, or the hamstring feels tight. Second thing can be macro trauma, you know, stepping off a curb, stuff like that, like a fall. The other one, I'm not mad on these two, but these are the ones they kind of say would be like what you eat and toxins. Biggest example of it would be like, you know, gout, if people drink a lot of alcohol. Yeah. And then the last one would be like internal things, you know, sometimes like liver pain can, like problems with the liver can cause like pain into the back.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, usually it's a micro trauma that causes it. The pelvis, the SI joint is slightly weird in terms of that the pelvis is off alignment and locked up. So it needs to be released and moving correctly. Best way to do that is get like a lacrosse ball. If people want, we can put in a show notes. I'll just send through like a video I do, but a lacrosse ball into the middle of the bum, essentially, with there's a piriformis underneath the glute muscle. You release that up from the hip and slightly back. You'll feel like a glute medius muscle. You want to release that. And then lastly, you might need to have a book on your front, but you want to put it kind of just to the outside of your belly button, roll around and find an area and just kind of breathe deep and let that relax. That will release the muscles off all around that joint. And then bring your knees up in line with your hips and rock very gently side to side, keeping the lowest part of the back on the ground. And that again will just kind of help mobilize the hips. Now, once the SI joint is released like that, and you might need to get them in hip, the key then is that isn't a joint that needs movement. It's a joint that like was too mobile and then kind of got locked into a place where it shouldn't, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So the rehab there is, you know, like your Superman or your bird dog, opposite arm, opposite leg, getting used to like holding the core and then double leg bridging really to where you're getting the glutes burning and making sure that there's no kind of arching through the back, that you're like maintaining that neutral spine. Double leg squat. If someone has like a tendency to get like SI joint problems, they don't want to be doing a lot of like split squat, lunges type work. It just shears the pelvis a little bit too much. So you want to kind of stick with like your bilateral stance, your kettlebell swings, your squats, stuff like that, double leg bridge, and then some core work, just to get everything stable.
Let's talk about the core. So in your theory, in your opinion, when we're talking about back pain in general, we've got the mobility issues we talked about, right? The ankle, the knees, the hips. What you know, you always hear this. It's like, oh, you have a weak core, right? Or your core is weak, or your low back's weak, or whatever it is. Like, what's the relationship to the back pain and poor abdominal control and or abdominal, like, you know?
Oh yeah, I definitely like. These are great questions. If there's three things, they're like, you know, we talked about that mobility, stability, motor control. There's three kind of systems of the body as another concept that help prevent, like, that keep us stable. So you have the passive structures of the body. These are like the ligaments, the discs, the facet, the joints of the body. You know, it's the same in the knee, like the cartilage, the ligaments. So these are just naturally keeping us, these naturally keep us in a good alignment, you know, like, or keep things stable.
Right.
Like, you don't have, they're called passive, like you're born with these, right? The second system is the muscular system, which is like, when there's an external load or when we're moving, the muscles should be also then contracting to kind of keep the joints in a good position. Okay, so they should be kind of assisting the ligaments, assisting the discs when, like, to absorb the load, you know. And then lastly is the the control system, the nervous system. And what that has to do is like dial up and dial down how much the core should work. Like we don't want to be contracting our core just walking. It's too much stress on it. You know, we want to have an awareness of we're in a good position. You know, it's like, so if I'm going to lift something, the ligaments and the discs are there to help. The muscles should be switched on, and then the nervous system should kind of be aware of like, okay, you need to push through your hips and use your hips the most, and then engage your core. And if all three things are working correctly, you know, you're not going to have many issues.
Right.
What happens is with that sedentary life, the muscles can a lot of times switch off. Then we're moving, as we said, too much through the back because we're stiff, as we mentioned, through the hips. Now, the ligaments and the discs then are getting overly worked already. So they're getting overly stressed because they're kind of having to move and like adjust. And then the muscular system isn't like switching on to support that. So we really need to work those core muscles because they then can take the pressure off the passive structures and allow a much better balance, you know, rather than the like, say if you're the passive structures, rather than you having to do like 100% of the lift, if you only have to do 50%, well, you can do a lot more before you're going to break down.
Right. So let's touch on the back aware belt for a second. So in your, you know, your epiphany to like, hey, this is something I need to try. Was it multifaceted from the joint to the core to like all the the pieces? Like, were you thinking about that as a whole, or were you thinking about one individual like component when you were kind of like coming up with the idea and the concept?
No, yeah, I was thinking mainly just the component of like one thing I hate in normal Pilates is this idea of like imprinting the spine onto the ground. This idea of like people flatten their back onto the ground. They're doing it because it gives you feedback, and then you're contracting. It's easier to know like that you're contracting if you push something down, but it takes the back out of its normal healthy arch.
Right.
So one, when people were trying to do those activation exercises, if they were doing them incorrectly, not learning how to hold that neutral spine, and then as we said, when they were standing, not being able to move through the hips and keep the back in a good alignment, they really struggled with. So that was the one thing, that was the main thing I wanted. I felt like I don't need anything for the mobility exercises, or I didn't think of anything that I could do. The stability, I thought I could help because it's a sensor, right? So it's like, don't let that sensor move. And then we can work on like contracting the core, but they're not moving their back or moving out of a position to contract. So it was really that idea of like, here's your back position. When we're doing these and they follow along with exercises, when you're doing that, don't like, it just gives them something that, okay, I can see what you're trying to say.
Got you. Explain, because we hear this term all the time. We hear the term neutral spine. And I don't think anybody even really knows what that means, right? I hear trainers say it all the time. I say, well, you give it up a neutral spine. And I'm pretty sure you don't even know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
What does that even mean? So explain to us and me in layman's terms, like how you would describe a neutral spine and why that's important, like what that really means.
Okay, so neutral spine basically means like middle. So basically, now it's a range. So if you like completely flex your spine one way, and then you completely arch your back the other way, if you found somewhere in the middle, the idea behind it, it's a biomechanical principle, is that if the back is completely flexed, because there's excessive pressure on the disc on one side, the ligaments on one side are overly stretched, that the amount of pressure it would take to like overload and hurt those joints or ligaments or discs is way less. Same if then, so we completely flex and then we lift something heavy that people could do. It's like, because everything's already to the extreme, to the end range, you can imagine it, and it's the same with the other range. You can imagine if I take the shoulder, it might be easier. If you pull back on the shoulder, now, if I'm here and someone like drops a very heavy weight on me, it's not a case that I'll injure it, but it just means that like the chances of an injury are higher compared to where if I bring this shoulder into the middle, into the center, now because the shoulder's in the middle, there's way further I can go. Like if I catch and I move a little bit, it's fine. And then I can push it back into the position. If I'm back as far as I can go and then I move a little bit more, it's like, you're just at the very end range.
Gotcha.
So when we say neutral spine, it's that idea of trying to teach someone that not to be at the end range of their back position. So not to be in a really big arch in their back, or not to be completely rounded in their back, getting used to finding somewhere in the middle. It doesn't have to be one particular point, but just you're kind of trying to center the back.
Yeah, so it's kind of it's stability, really, is what you're saying. It's like neutral spine is going to have more stability than a completely flexed spine. I'm thinking in terms of like weightlifting. I'm thinking in terms of like a deadlift. You see somebody deadlift inappropriately. You know what I mean? When they overarch the back or whatever. Yeah. So I'm just kind of like trying to conceptualize that from a biomechanical component.
So there's two things there. The safest position is that neutral spine. So if you arch your back and you round and then you find the middle and you can hold that, it's just like you have way more wiggle room that if something moves, you're not at the end range.
Right.
You don't get into much trouble if you flex and then you don't change that position. Right. So you'll see in a deadlift, what people will do is like breathe out. If they engage their lats, and as they come up, then they don't move their back really until they go back into more of a neutral spine. They never go into it more. Where people get in trouble is, so that's why, because people can see like power lifters and stuff and go, well, they're flexed.
Yeah.
Their musculature is like, if you put a back aware belt on them, you would see that while the sensor is into like a flex position, the sensor doesn't move once they start lifting. They move through their hips, right. And then they bring it back to center, to bring it back to the neutral spine. So where people get in trouble is just your normal sedentary person. A lot of times they'll start in an arch position, so they'll start quite extended, and then as they start going down, they rapidly move their back into flexion, and that like changing of movement is weird. Like Stuart McGill had done a study, and it was like they were looking at power lifters and they had fluoroscopy, so they put on like different things to measure the spinal movements, and they had like 10 do it, 9 did the lifts in those flexion. One guy in it lifting heavy weights, they could see he moved his spine more and he ruptured a disc. It was terrible for him, but it was unbelievable for the study just to be able to see that. So I think that's the thing. You can, like those, and strong men as well, you can round your back as long as you're locking your musculature in. And that's where there is controversy about the neutral spine. Is it needed? Or
well, this is why somebody hurts their back picking up something off the floor, like picking up some water or a box or whatever. That's the same thing.
They're out of they're out of their neutral spine, so everything is already like in a more compromised position, and then what they're not doing is massively contracting their, like if they went down to pick up the box and then could really like contract their muscles and be strong, they're probably not going to have an issue.
Right.
But for day to day, what I'm thinking is like, well, why we live in the internet now where everyone is so siloed that like, rather than like common sense being a thing of like, look, there's definitely times where you can have a flex back and then not be an issue. It's like, well, but if I just have a normal person, why don't I just try teach them to move through their hips? Let the hips take, say, 80% of the load, and then the last 20% is not a big deal. So that's what I do a lot of times. It's just teaching someone, move through your hips first, then bend through your knees, and then bend through your back.
Yeah.
And that's like naturally going to be a better thing to do over time.
Love that. Let's talk about the back aware belt. So the belt in and of itself would be described as like kind of like it's not a weightlifting belt, but that kind of has the look of it. It
has the look of a belt.
Yeah, it looks like a weightlifting belt, and it has sensors on it. And so then once you get the belt, then there's a series of exercises that you take them through, and this teaches them based on the sensors in the belt good movement, bad, not bad, good movement, improper movement, that type of thing. You kind of explain that a little bit.
Yeah, well, like literally, we're just updating it now so that essentially the sensor will be on the screen. So you can follow me along doing exercises, like say doing Pilates or whatever, or gym. And it's like, we just talk through it. And then we just have like little 5-minute videos as well, where it's like, say if you want to learn how to do a squat correctly using the belt. So essentially you have the belt on, we're doing a class, we're working on our core or whatever, and I'm like talking through. So my screen is on my sensor's on the screen and your sensor's on the screen. And it's like, I'm just telling you what I'm doing, and you're just following along. So you're getting awareness of like, when I say arch your back, come all the way up, your sensor should be moving left and right. It's like, well, if it's not, then it's like, we have a Q&A, say once a week. It's like, okay, like, why isn't that? And I can have a look.
Yeah.
But it's just over time, then they're getting that idea. And as I said, that's the follow alongs that I have. It's like, people might just want to go to the gym themselves or work out at home, and they can just have it on their screen or have it on their phone just to look at, so that they can just learn how to move better.
It's going to give them feedback in the actual moment, right? Like
in the exact moment. Yeah.
So it's real-time feedback.
If they arch their back, it goes red, it moves to the end, and it'll start vibrating on your belts. Yeah.
Love that. So, I mean, I could think of a multitude of the, people and clients in particular that should have something like this. But when you're conceptualizing this, like, who were you thinking about? Like, was there a particular avatar? Were you thinking about just people who move improperly? Like, who's this belt perfect for? And I think the answer is probably everybody, but we really kind of dialed it in a little more.
Yeah, no, I really thought it wasn't like, say yourself, like, it'd probably be nice to know, but you just have a good awareness. So
yeah,
the 3 people I had in my head were like people with back pain,
yes,
just to make sure they're doing rehab correctly, people who like working out at home, who have like confident, like, confidence that they're doing things correctly. Mm-hmm. And then the lastly was like, manual handling training courses that like, it's like just to get them signed off that like, yeah, they're actually able to do it correctly. They were the 3 that I had in my head. And then maybe like personal trainers and stuff like that they can just have a belt, give it to their client, strap it on their client, and they're doing it, and it just kind of makes it a bit more, gamifies it a little bit more. But that's definitely it. Like, confidence when you're working out at home, people with back pain, and then, as I said, that more manual handling thing.
Yeah, I think the manual handling thing is a great idea, because I don't know the statistic on it, but like, that's one of the number 1 reasons for like workplace injuries, and then people being out of work is.
And I don't know if you've done one of those courses. They're the most boring things in the world.
Oh, like, put you to sleep.
Where at least if you have to put on a belt and be like, all right, like just show me you can lift this without moving through your back and doing it correctly. You know what? It's way harder though than you think to.
Oh yeah.
To start that, it's just like, I don't want to start. I just want to give that to like manual handling trainers, but it's like really, I suppose it's regulated at the moment in terms of, even though it's just a training aid, they're like, oh, we just want to do the old course, or people just don't really care. And that's the problem with a few things. I think the health and fitness is really good. You have people like yourself, Jay, who are just really passionate, want to do well. And then you go to a lot of manual handling. It's like, there's people who want to tick a box. You see, we all have a positivity bias. So we never think that's going to happen to me until it happens. And then it's like, oh my God, I can't believe I actually hurt myself lifting that. It's like, it has to happen to someone. But until that, it's like, oh, I don't want to learn, or like, tick that off. We did, do that online, and they don't really care if people are learning or not.
I'll use myself as an example. I've been working out for 36 years. Like, I started working out. I started working out when I was 12 years old, and I am still consistently making sure that my biomechanics are appropriate, making sure my range of motion is right, like making sure my ankle flexibility is what it needs to be. And I get in. Somebody who's done this for 36 years. I do this for a living. It's all I do is fitness, nutrition, try to make people healthier. I consistently have to work on my own stuff. So if you're just somebody working out at home and you don't have 36 years of experience, plus more degrees and certifications than I can shake a stick at, I still get ankle immobility from time to time based on, things that I'm doing inappropriately. So this would be a good reminder for anybody, regardless of your level of quote unquote experience, as just a training tool to make sure that you're appropriately moving your body. Because I think, at this stage of the game for me at 40, almost 49, I'm in the longevity stage, right? Like,
yeah.
I'm not like, I've gone through my powerlifting stage, bodybuilding stage, like what I call my nonsense stage of like, squatting 600 pounds,
Yeah.
deadlifting 500 pounds, like doing stupid stuff. Like now I'm like, I want to be able to get up tomorrow and work out
feel supple and
for the rest of my life, right? And be in great shape. So I think this is something that could really bring an awareness to all levels of fitness, just as, as a reminder.
Yeah, definitely. Like, and the thing what you're saying, it's like, that was who it was for. It's like, nobody goes out intentionally. Like, you must see it. If you go to the gym, I could take a video like every day if I knew how to blur out people's faces of like doing burpees and just like terrible technique, or someone thinking they're doing a plank correctly and they're just like, their back is completely arched. So it's like, you're not using your core. You're either using your ligaments, as we said, or maybe your back muscles to hold that. But it's like, but they're holding it for so long. But like the thing with you, Jay, or people, a lot of people don't know what they don't know. Like, it's like, oh, that's a bit stiff, I'll work on that. That's where a lot of people think they're doing things correctly, but they don't even know where to start. And that's where it's for that type of person. It's like just your normal person. Like, to be fair, I still think like going to a personal trainer is still better, like, but it's not for everyone. Some people want to work out at home. And like it's expensive, obviously, compared to the belt. So it's just a second option there, and at least make people aware of, oh my God, I'm doing this wrong, and stop doing it wrong, and then learn how to do it correctly. And over time, you're going to get so much better results, because there's also a thing called arthrokinetic inhibition. And what that means is that,
all right, whoa. You can't say
I was going to explain it.
And then just cruise by it. So say it one more time.
Okay, so it's called arthrokinetic inhibition. And what it means is that when a joint is in a poor position, the muscles around that joint will not fire effectively. So if you have the pelvis, say, in a poor position, the glutes will not switch on. It's like it doesn't want to like contract when it knows it's poor. So while you might have to take a step back and get the form correct initially, over time, it's like, say people are holding a plank for a minute, but like, because you're in an arch position, things aren't firing the way they should.
Right.
So you're not getting the results you should, even though like you're holding a plank for a while and you're doing the work, or you're not getting like the glutes working the way they should, because you actually, say on a hip thrust, are just like arching at your back and then coming back up, and you're not folding in the middle and then pushing back up through the legs. So like, it's not even just a health thing. It's like you'll get way more effective results if you do the exercises, learn the movement first, and then build on the fitness on top of that.
What I've learned about my body is I have the propensity for my gluteus medius to get really, I always say it's not firing correctly. And I can tell. I can tell when I'm walking, I can tell when I'm in a squat, and I'm like, I've learned over the 36 years how to like activate that muscle, like get it to kind of wake back up. But the average person is just like, oh my gosh, like right here, like I feel like it's like dead, like it's not moving, it's whatever. It's like, and they don't know what to do. So I think this is a great indicator, like you're talking about. That's a great thing to bring up.
And can I say, like, because what we've talked about today is like, you've actually said it 3 times, you're just like naturally doing it. But a lot of people, and that's what this podcast is actually good, is it a mobility issue? You talk about like, I can feel sometimes when I'm jammed, and work on that, and not like just go through. And then the second thing, is it an activation issue? That like, it could be like the core, you need to drop back and do, say, glute clam work for your glute med, or just basic core or bridging. And then lastly, is it an awareness thing? Is it that I'm just not like dialed in, that I'm aware of how I should be moving? So yeah, that's great. So it's great that I brought up that thing, mobility, stability, motor control, and you naturally in your thing are just like checking in with yourself and feeling these things. And the more you do it,
100%,
It's like, there's a great story in the Bible. It's I don't know, you're probably, we're Catholic over here. We're pretty loose with it, but like there's one in the but the one thing I will say, for this is just going so off script, but
No, I love off script. Let's roll.
because you know what, one thing with like agnostic, of course, but you know, when atheists, their thing about like just attacking the Bible, it's like, dudes, that's like, I know people take it very literal, but they're like stories of ways of explaining things that, like, there's a saying, what when the prophet or the sage points at the moon, all the idiot sees is the finger. And it's like, you're actually no better than a guy who, is talking about Adam and Eve if you're then questioning him. Because there's like, my sister did this course, and it was like, I'd love to do it. I couldn't find any, but it was like looking at all the meanings of stories. So there's one about like the wise men visiting Jesus, which a lot of people would know, he was born, they come, right? And this is such a little innocuous story, where they visit the baby Jesus, they bring the gold, frankincense, and myrrh that people would hear about. And then at that night, Herod is like looking basically to kill Jesus. And that night, he has a blockade on the road that they've come, and they get a vision when they're dreaming to say, don't go back that way, go back another way, because you'll get caught. Now, I heard that story, I don't know how many times, just in mass when I was younger, never thought anything of it. Kira's like, do you know what that means? It's like, when you have an epiphany, you can't go back the way you've come. You see the world different. And like, that's the thing here with, it's the same with like nutrition, and it's the same with movement. Like, once you start moving correctly, even like for you, even when something's stiff, it's like, you can't go back the other way. You'll never just go back to moving crap, because you're aware, you have an epiphany. If you see something for what it is, or something different, it's like you're fundamentally changed. You don't go back doing the things you did, if you so it was this that's a very long-winded way of saying that
I like
once you learn these skills, you kind of have them then for life. Even even as you said, if you start losing them, you're aware that I'm not moving as well as I should, and then you look at things to adjust it and address it.
You're probably a lot like me. Like I'm like a big question asker of like, what is this really, right? It's like the initial presentation of most things isn't usually the thing that you're looking for. Does that make sense?
100%.
So it's like when somebody comes in and says, "Oh, Jay, my knee's bothering me," they're usually shocked, because the knee's not even the first thing that I look at. Exactly. They're like, what are you doing? My knee's the problem. I'm like, no, your knee's not the problem. Your knee's what's presenting with the problem, but it's actually not the problem. And then you can trace and figure out what that is. I think that comes with an awareness of just, like I said, been doing this for 36 years, like you. You've dedicated your life to it. So we're kind of trained that way. So for anybody listening, what I would start to do if I was you is I would just ask more questions of yourself. Like, okay, what is this really? Like, yes, my knee is uncomfortable, but then start to like maybe trace the trail a little bit. How are my hips? How's my AT band, right? How's my, how are my psoas? How am I moving in general? And usually you'll find that it's the thing that you think is the problem isn't even the problem. And I think that's where this belt comes in. Every time I kept looking at the website yesterday, I was like, this is I love how you call it the back aware belt, because I kept coming back to the word awareness. It's really just about awareness of proper mobility. And like I always tell people, like, learn to activate your abs, right? It's like, it's easy if I say, oh, and flex your bicep. You're like, no problem. Here we go. Boom. If I say flex your abs, most people are like,
exactly.
I'm like, are you doing it? And they're like, I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah.
I don't think so. Or I'll say activate your core, and they'll be like they get this look on their face, like, what? I said, are you doing it? They're like, I think so. And I'm like, it's just this mind muscle connection that has to be built over time. And I think this awareness piece is really what that's all about. Is like, once you learn how to squat or learn how to move, it then becomes your new level of standard. And then when you start to deviate from that, you're really aware of it quickly. But until you're just assuming that you're hoping you're squatting correctly.
Yeah. And I think the good thing to say to people is that, look, just be patient. It comes over time. Like, I literally just had a WhatsApp. We have like a WhatsApp group, and it's like, she's like, I was just out walking a dog, and I'm just like way more aware of, like, say standing. It's like, oh, I can just like lift that, and that takes the core up. But that just takes like a few weeks of thinking, I'm not sure if I'm doing this correctly, lifting up and reminding it. And over time, as you said, that's the second bit. That's the activation bit. You need to learn just like wake these things up. And once they're woken up, it's easy to keep them awake. And then it's so much, like, how many people, as we know, who, why they do deadlift is if you ask them, is like, so their legs will look good, or leg strength plus the core, but yet then they're not moving through their legs correctly. So it's like, well, why are you doing that then? It's like, they don't like, you actually like aren't even moving through you're not working the thing you want to work, but yet you still do it because you think you're told to do it. It's like, and they're not thinking about that.
Totally. The movement is actually inefficient for the result that you're trying to acquire.
That was way better. Can we cut the bit I said? I'm
I mean, but I think there's a lot of things like that. But I love what you just said about the walking the dog, right? And she's asking herself, or he's asking himself, am I doing this right? I think there's a beauty in that as well, right? I think you're going to have to ask yourself that question it's like learning the foreign language. It's like, it's like, you don't just, you know the word, you can say the word, but 2 years later, the word kind of just rolls off your tongue. Right? So you're like, am I saying this right? It doesn't sound right. It doesn't feel right. You keep doing it, and then eventually it does. And now you can just, you can learn, and like, I am doing this right. So keep asking those questions, and don't get discouraged by having to say, like, is this right? Am I doing this? Like, I think that's just a good awareness piece to keep you moving.
Exactly. And one thing I would say to people is, like, when you're exercising, like, the more you're asking yourself, like, switching these core on, the better, even like during the day. But just know that, like, this should be reactive. I think sometimes people think this isn't like I contract my core all the time when I'm walking or doing these things. No, this, like, I remember I was learning how to move through my hips, and like, for running, I just needed to kind of get my hips working a bit better. And I went to like pick something up, and I actually like hit the wardrobe door behind me. And then that just clicked, that I was like, oh my God, now I don't have to think about this. The first thing that happens is my hips go back.
Yeah.
And it's like, like, that must have happened, I know, years before, whereas like 100%. I normally just pick up, say, through my back. But because I was practicing it, through the hips, I was just like, it just was automatic. And like, it's just being patient with that. It's like knowing that your body wants to move and your body wants to be healthy. So don't get discouraged. Like, the more you practice this, the more, again, will kind of like help it, because it does want to be healthy. It'll really help you over time. It'll work.
I love that. I've got a couple more questions before we go, but they're really for me.
Brilliant.
So,
loving that.
backawarebelt.com.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, and then your Pilates site is, how do you say your last name?
Everard. So that's EVERARD, Pilates, PILATES.com. That's for like sports Pilates. That's if you're a runner or a triathlete and you just want to do something, as you said, like, running is very good for passive, like for cardiovascular fitness, burning calories, good for your heart and lungs. Running does not work the muscular system that we were talking about. It only, like, the passive system gets overloaded. That's why all running injuries are like plantar fasciitis, knee pain, hip pain. No long distance runner gets like a hamstring tear. They get like a tendinopathy. They don't get like things like a football player will get, because the muscular system isn't working. So it's just good, like, once a week you could do yoga, you could do Pilates, you could do the gym, something outside of running to like essentially switch on those muscles. And then, like we said, the body wants to be healthy. Once the muscular system is switched on, it will naturally take pressure off the passive structures. You don't have to do anything running. You never have to think about your technique or anything. Once you're activating these muscles in a way that's similar to running, but like just with like, good gym work or good Pilates, it will naturally do it when you run. You do not have to think about your form. You should never think about your form running. It should be just more of a natural thing.
I love that. I'm going to start directing people to your website here, because I get this. I get this all the time. People are like, "Hey Jay, I'm going to run a marathon." And I'm like, you can't run out of sight in the dark. Like
I know.
you don't even, you've never ran before in your life. What are you going to do? And they're like, "Oh, I'm going to start training." And I'm like, what'd you do this weekend? They're like, "Oh, I ran 12 miles. I can barely walk today." I'm like,
I know, crazy.
I'm like, what are you doing? I'm like, I said, unless it's done correctly, 99.9% of people who make that statement to me, like, "I've never ran a day in my life and I'm going to run a marathon," always get hurt, always get injured every time. So you're my new guy. I'm just going to start like, okay, here you go. Here's the website. Here's the information. Go start doing this, please, before you even get out on the road. So I love having resources, because you're so right. It's like the mechanics and all that stuff is so vital. And it's just imperative that you learn all the proper technique and all the movements and all that stuff. And I think you're the dude to do that. So the not personal questions, but the questions for me is this. Talk to me. Let's have a little brief chat about just the world of wellness, the world of health in the UK, in Ireland specifically. Like, right now, I've been doing this for a long time, and we're at a really critical place here in the United States of like 80% of our food is processed foods. 70% of our society is on the verge of obesity.
Yeah.
Heart disease is at an all-time high. Diabetes is an all-time high. Cancers, like you name it, like all the major things are just rising like crazy. What's the state of the union in Ireland, like just from your perspective?
We're the same. We're like in nearly in everything, because we're Western world as well. Like the America, the US is kind of like the leader for good and bad.
Okay.
And like we would have, when I was growing up, it was like we would comment on Americans like in general. God, they're so big, a lot of them, and whatever else. But we are literally just like 5 or 10 years before. We eat. So yeah, we're no better. Honestly, we're no better at the moment. It's scary. As I said, it's a very tough thing. It's like always Ireland and UK, it just feels like we're about 5 to 10 years behind you.
Okay.
For good and bad. And like on the wellness, as you said, it's just like people are getting, especially kids and stuff.
Yeah.
No, but even adults, like getting there's so much more diabetes, so much more like obesity, and it's just such a tough one to fix. I don't know what to do with it.
What do you see as you and I aren't going to solve this problem today, but is there a awareness, like a centralized awareness around that? Or is it kind of like it's being like kind of like pushed to the side? Is it talked about? Is it kind of like you know what I'm saying? Like, is it?
No, yeah, people would be aware of it. And because it's been quite acute, it's been quite quick that it's come in that, but this is what I don't get. It's like people are aware, like, fruit and veg, especially in Ireland, that's one thing. Like, say you have like Trader Joe's or something, but we have really good produce for very cheap. Like 50 cent will buy you like a kilo of carrots here. Like, like it's not even, you couldn't even say it's because you can't afford the food. You could eat like unbelievable dinners for like very, very cheap. There are initiatives and all, but it's just like, I feel like, as you said, when we were going to school, everybody's lunchbox was roughly the same. Yeah. Now I feel in Ireland, you got 20% of the lunchboxes are like freaking carrot sticks and hummus. And then you got like a middle bit okay. And then you got 40% of people, and it's like a can of Coke and a Mars bar. And it's just gone. And then especially now with like video games and stuff, people are more afraid of obviously leaving the kids out in general. Yeah. Which is so strange. It's like there was obviously more like danger when we were growing up. In theory, you didn't have a mobile, you didn't have a phone. You were just gone all day. We had a tree house one year that was like across a field. We would literally just like pack up. I honestly was about 10 and be like, yeah, we'll see you literally tonight. Yeah. And be gone. Where now it's like, I don't know, people don't want their kids out, and like obviously safety is a lot more important, but
Yeah.
I think a lot of that's the case. And then, as you said, that availability of food is just like, we had another thing. I don't know about you, when like my mom would buy, we'd buy the shopping on Saturday morning, and like we'd have like 3-liter bottles of like soda and stuff, but once it was gone,
It was gone.
Like it was gone. Like Friday was like the worst day. It was like, oh my God, she has to go shopping. There is nothing in the house. So then you are just eating like oats and your bread or whatever. So
are you guys like fast food? Is it a fast food society over there? Like drive-throughs and like that kind of jazz, or is that not hit as hard as it has here?
We always had kind of like, we'd have kind of fish and chip shops. You'd have like McDonald's, KFC would be here. It's not super like that. They're not like, they're busy, but it's not like that stuff. Like people still would predominantly eat at home, or they'd make meals at home. I think it's just that availability of sugar is just like gone through the roof. Just like how cheap it is, how easy it is to get this. Like there'll be one group here that they're Irish travelers. They'd be like very poor, for want of a better word, kind of like disenfranchised a little bit.
Okay.
But when I was growing up, they were all like stick thin, like all really thin, probably. And now they're all the size of houses, probably because that type of food is like
so rare,
so like available, so it's interesting.
Wow. And then do you guys have, last question, we've gotten so lazy as Americans. Like we're either a fast food society, 80% of our food is processed, or we've got like Uber Eats and like Postmates and like Grubhub. Like you don't even have to leave your house anymore. Like that people will actually just go get you food and bring it and drop.
That's only coming in. As I said, it's scary because we're always like about 5 to 10 years behind you.
Okay.
So it's like Uber Eats is coming, like there's a place, a Deliveroo, it's getting more popular. They're not super popular here yet. But even I feel like those, they kind of do well in America, and then they come across, or someone thinks this will work here.
Yeah. So I owe you an apology for trying to ruin Ireland as far as the Americans.
It's just funny. It's like, because the Western world, it's like, the US is the capital of the Western world. So it's like, it gives us a lot of good things. And then it's as I said, it's when I was growing up, it's like we would go on holidays, and if you saw a lot of Americans, you would kind of comment, it's like, God, the size of them, like, and then just gradually, and not that gradually, like within 5-10 years, it was like, Jesus, it's like you could put a group of Irish people and a group of Americans, and except for the accent, you would not know what it is. And it's funny because it's like, we do have like, we're a bit more socialist in the East, so like we would have a lot of like initiatives and stuff like that, but it kind of helps the ones that want help, and it's just, I don't know what to do for the rest, because it's scary.
Well, trust me, I racked my brain on it. So if you come up with the answer, buzz me so we can we can start to implement it. Dude, I appreciate you coming on the show, man. This has been super fun, super entertaining.
Yeah, I absolutely love this. Yeah, thank you so much.
For sure, man. This has been, really educational for me, and I know the audience has got a massive benefit from it. We'll put the links to all your websites, your social media, everything in the show notes, and we'll just get some people getting the quality help they need to learn how to move. And I appreciate you, man. Thanks for coming on the show.
Jay, thank you so much. I know I was hounding you, so I appreciate you having me on.
I love it. I love the tenacity. I appreciate you coming on. All right, brother. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. Take care.
All right. See you in a bit. Hey, before you go, I'd just like to say thank you again for listening to the Thrive Forever Fit podcast and watching on YouTube. It means the absolute world to me. And if you would do me one favor, and that is simply subscribe and review this podcast on whatever platform it is that you enjoy it on, YouTube, Apple, Spotify, doesn't matter. I would absolutely be so grateful and so thankful if you do that for me. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you again next week with an awesome, awesome episode. Bye.